Welcome back to your number one source for information, education, inspiration on the most underrated career opportunity in business today. That is a career in the insurance industry. You are listening to the You Should Get a License podcast edition. This is Rod Powell. Today, very excited for our guest. The young lady who I'm going to be speaking with is a 25-year veteran of this business. But, you know, when you see her, you would not believe that she's been in this business for 25 years, unless she started when she was like 10 years old or something.
Well, you know.
But she is the founder of ACO Insurance Consulting. She's the principal of ACO Insurance Brokerage. And she is also one of the 2022 Insurance Business Association's Elite Women of 2022. And for those who need to know what elite means, it's the select group that is superior in terms of ability and qualities to the rest of a group or society. And she certainly is one of the elite. Also, 2022 winner of Global 100 of Insurance Business Magazine. She is critically acclaimed when you talk about a change agent, a thought leader in this industry, in this space. Her passion for insurance is only matched by her passion for diversity, equity, and inclusion, where she is also a champion, serving on several national boards, including National African American Insurance Association. She's creator of the Black Men in the Insurance Industry, Black Women in the Insurance Industry, the conferences that are related to those organizations, as well as Black Friday, which by the time you're listening to this, you know, you'll know about Black Fridays that are happening, you know, all around the country. But so excited to have her on for a conversation. I want to welcome to the You Should Get a License podcast, Miss Ngozi Nnaji. How are you doing?
What it do, bruh? What it do? I'm so happy to be here with you today. You don't even know.
Listen, you are an inspiration. There are certain people that you meet, and you know, just, you know, when they speak, you know, when you see them, when you see the impact they're making, like, yo, they're special. You know, they're a history maker, and you certainly are that. So thank you for the time today. Your career, I think this is going to be an exciting conversation because your career is so expansive. You know, you were starting, you know, as an underwriter initially, which we'll talk about, and then kind of branching into building your own brokerage, and then moving into the consulting firm and everything that's kind of happened and transpired along the way. So where I'll start is, you know, for this forum, it really is speaking to individuals who may be looking at coming into this industry. Mm-hmm. And, you know, what might they face? You know, what should they be, you know, kind of what kind of mindset, you know, should they prep themselves to have, and what kind of paths, you know, and opportunities are available to them. So I want to just start by talking about where you are right now on the consulting firm, like what you do, you know, what your focus is, what your area of specialty is, and then we'll kind of go back and kind of build up to how you got to that point.
So, you know, it's funny because, and, you know, you and I, we're straight shooters. And so I don't think I've ever really like told the story the way I'm about to tell it now around kind of the consulting side of what I do. Yeah. You know, as you mentioned, 25 years in the business, you know, over time, you gain some knowledge, right? You gain a little bit of wisdom if you're doing it right. Right?
That's right.
And so it dawned on me when I, you know, with the unfortunate murder of George Floyd, I was at the time the president of the Greater Hartford chapter of the National African American Insurance Association. And in that role, you know, over the years prior, you know, people would call looking for information, right? Mm-hmm. You know, Ngozi, like, where can I find this? Where can I do this? You know, tell me about this. What do you need to know? And initially, you know, it was okay, right? Like, you answer, you respond, you give information. But again, with the murder of George Floyd, there became an influx of these inquiries, right? And I started scratching my head, like, I'm giving this away for free. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's taking up 40 to 60 hours of my week, but I'm giving this away for free. And you know, there's a part of me that said, not that you need to monetize everything, but I do think, you know, people value information more if they got to pay for it, right? If they have to exchange something for it. And so that's when I started to really think about my network, my influence, the leverage that I had in the positions that I was holding in various different boards and leadership positions, and really thought it wasn't more about making money for myself, even though, we're hustlers, right? Like,
We gotta live.
right? When you become an independent agent, it's all about the hustle. But it
Yeah.
was really about, how can I make this more meaningful, right? How can I make this so that when people approach me and ask, they think before they ask, right? And I challenged their intentionality by saying, well, you're gonna have to cough up a little bit of cash in order to get this, right? And so that's where, I really started to think about this consulting firm and what it could be and the impact that it could have. Because if I got people to think before they spend or think before they asked, then they would be more purposeful about using the information I gave them, because they knew in that conversation, I would hold them accountable for the use of that information. And so with that being said, that gave me the opportunity to launch all these initiatives, right? Because now not only was I creating a pathway in which I can fund it, right? Finance all these initiatives. But again, it just gave me the opportunity to challenge people about their intentionality and their purpose, so that we can make progress in this space.
Yeah. Yeah. So ACO Insurance Consulting, you said stemming from, George Floyd, and obviously, that was, look, these are things that have been present in society for
a long time,
forever. I mean, since we landed on the shores, right? Since the birth of the country. But what was it about that moment, that said, hey, I need to really kind of step out? Because at that point, you're still running your brokerage, right? I mean, what was there an initial desire to move into that space anyway? You said, okay, now the timing is right, or was it just like, hey, enough is enough? This needs to happen now?
I think it was a convergence of all of the above, right? Like, so to your point, the issues around diversity, and I'm using quotation marks here because it's much more than just diversity, but for the sake of conversation, I mean, it's been going on for a long time in our society. It's been going on for a long time in our industry, whether we want to recognize that or not. But even just as a Black woman, right? Just period, it's been going on for a long time in my life. And so I think although, you don't want to kind of, this tragedy around George Floyd, right, is an unfortunate event. And so we don't want to maximize and create profit and do all these things. But I think there is some positive that comes out of it, right? And I think part of that positive nature was that there was a different kind of awareness. Not that there wasn't awareness before, and that, obviously there could be more awareness, but it was different this time a little bit, right? Because you had companies now, especially, and I'm kind of catering more to our industry, you had companies who are now willing to put their brands at risk, right, to stand up. Now, granted, you can question 2.5 years later, okay, what are they doing? That's a whole nother conversation. But at least on the onset, right, they were willing to put their brands at risk, which is very something we've never seen that before in the US. And so it was really, again, between enough is enough, I need to do something, to, oh, wow, they're really listening, a lot of them, some of them, to what could we do if we really took advantage of all this, right? What impact could we have? And that's why I was like, yo, forget it. We're just going to do it. We're going to see what comes out of this. Because what I also recognize, and no shade on the industry, but this is seasonal. This is temporary, right? At some point, our industry is going to shift its mindset, and something else is going to rock us to make us focus on the next thing, right? Whatever that looks like. And maybe this diversity conversation will come back again in another 10 years. I don't know, right? It is very, what do you call it? I can't even think of the word.
Yeah, it's cyclical.
Cyclical. That's the word I was looking for. Think of it. But in this moment, I wanted to do something, and so what I knew is I call them my clique, you included, right? Like, I had this network of Black professionals at my disposal, right, and at fingertip reach that I could call on, who were feeling the way I was feeling, who was frustrated the way I was frustrated, who wanted to have impact the way I wanted to have impact, but we just needed to organize ourselves. Like we were dealing with so many emotions at that point, right? But we needed to figure out how to use those emotions for purpose and for good, right? Get into some good trouble. And so again, all that coming together, I was like, boom, here it is. My firm itself had already been established. It was established in March of 2017, but I was focused on conventional insurance consulting, right? Where, we were the third parties that come in that look at the insurance program. We tell you what's good, what's bad, what's ugly, right? That kind of thing. And I was like, I totally ditched that. I was like, forget that. We about to do something different.
Yeah.
We're about to do something different. So
it's a completely different approach, which is why I was like, well, you were running, your agency actively, and then to kind of shift, not to completely switch gears, but it's like you really kind of change the focus and trajectory of where you were taking your business and the way that you communicate from, the client focus of making sure that your risk is managed properly to, I'm going to go to a company that is actually writing that business and say, hey, what are you doing internally in your structures?
Correct.
Did you find that it was you mentioned, having the networks already. Did you find that companies being receptive, to the climate, were open to take that advice? And the second part of that is in being held accountable, willing to take the actionable steps. And is that something that still continues now as we kind of lukewarm from the epicenter of 2020?
So I ain't gonna call out no names. But, yeah, you know what? There's a lot of lip service going on. I'll just put it like that. A lot of lip service going on because I think, they didn't expect there to be someone like me on the back end of that statement they put on social media saying, okay, yeah. I mean, you can tell us that you're doing something, but really, what are you really doing? Yeah. And then when I ask you to do something that's meaningful for me as a Black agent, for a Black insurance professional, and you balk at it, then how are you really showing up for me, right? Because I'm telling you what I need. I'm telling you what you need to do for me. I'm telling you how you can make me thrive and survive in this industry that has shunned me for so long, but you say no? Yeah. Wait a minute now. No, what are you really doing? And so, yes, I will say there's a number of companies that are still struggling with the accountability component, but there are some companies, and I will say few, that are willing to be vulnerable, that understand that that's what it takes. And if they make a mistake, so be it, right?
Absolutely.
It's all about, I was at an IICF conference last week, and they were talking about, kind of rupturing, right? So you tear down, but you got to repair. And so there's these vulnerable companies that are willing to kind of, maybe they made a misstep, maybe they said the wrong thing, maybe they made the wrong action, but it's that repair part, right? They say, okay, I acknowledge that, I take accountability for that and responsibility for that, but I'm going to do right the next time. I'm progressing through this and learning through this. Because again, in an industry that has never accepted diversity as kind of a number one initiative, there are going to be some missteps. Everybody's not going to know what to do and how to do it. And so to answer your question, yes, even 2 years ago, there were companies that were like, oh, no, see, you don't understand. Our intent was only to put up that statement. we weren't going to do anything. Come on, are you serious? Right? Like behind closed doors, you're like, really? That really came out of your mouth?
Like, I didn't even know we put that up. Oh,
right, exactly.
PR department put that up.
Right, I didn't even know. Right, leaders in the organizations didn't even know. But we still have that happening today.
Yeah,
I've had a couple of clients where I do some DEI consulting and do some assessments within cultures, and challenge them around having these cultures that create fear, right? And they need to do some changing immediately. And they've told me, no, we're good. But you're creating cultures of fear, right? Like, how can you be good with that, right?
Right.
Where you got employees who don't even want to speak up because they're, scared of, retaliation of some degree. So how do you deal with that? But
yeah, it's interesting because, some of the conversations that we have, in other forms are about, recruiting and getting more, Black people, more African Americans to join the insurance industry, right? Like to just get people engaged in the business. Do you feel like that's a part of why, we as a people are sometimes turned off by the business or don't want to get involved in this industry?
So I think there's some miseducation going on. So I want to set the record straight, and we're going to do it here and now on this podcast.
Yeah, come on.
So if you look at the U.S. Census Bureau, right, Black people make up anywhere from 12 to 13% of the population, right? We make up 12 to 14% of the insurance population here in the U.S.
Correct.
So I want to correct people on saying there's representation if you look at it from that perspective, right? Like we are being represented. The issue is where we're represented and how we're represented, right? So and don't get me wrong, I'm all for us being the majority versus the minority, right? So increasing that representation to even to the extent that it surpasses the US Census Bureau numbers, right? But I want to be careful about, giving the impression that there is a lack of representation in the industry because we are represented. However, there's more Black women represented than Black men. Mm-hmm. And to everyone's, I think, acknowledgement, we're not sitting in the right positions with the right influence and the right power, right? We're sitting in more administrative, operational, right, non-revenue impacting positions with little influence. And so I think that's where we need to, kind of turn the dial is, kind of reclaiming our place in certain positions. And there's a lot of work that I do around educating professionals of today, Black professionals of today, about our Black insurance history, right? We owned insurance companies.
Absolutely.
No, we owned, what I mean? And yeah. I know, but there's people I talk to who are like, what? No. See, we were sitting up at the top making decisions.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And so we do have a rightful place to be in those same places, positions today. It's just, we're not. Right. And there's a lot of reasons why that happened and what the situation is now where those Black insurance companies are, Black owned insurance companies are. But again, I think it's a lot around the education piece, right? And I think the appeal or the lack of appeal for Black people today to come into to our industry is one, not seeing that representation in the higher level positions, right? We all know about that. I think the industry has talked a lot about that, but not really knowing our history, really not knowing that, we are the foundation, much like we're the foundation of why America is America, right? How it was built. Slave trade was insured, right? Yes. Lloyd's of London has already acknowledged their participation in that. That's right. Black Wall Street was built off of insurance money, right? Mm-hmm. Not only from our own Black-owned insurance companies, from the Aetnas, the Travelers, the Hartfords of the world who insured those Black businesses on Black Wall Street, right? Whether it's in Tulsa and every other. So I think there's a combination of that. And I'll just mention one more thing. I think especially for our talent coming into the industry, we got to be relative, right? Like to me, to some degree, the best thing that has happened to our industry as far as marketing is Jake, the State Farm agent, because Jake allows our kids and our kids to realize insurance ain't just about, that guy that used to come to grandmama's house and get the money from under her mattress, right? Jake knows NFL players, he knows NBA players, right? He's golfing, he's hanging out with them, right? That's what the insurance industry is all about. They need to understand that when the banks need money and need to protect their money, who do they come to, Rod?
That's it.
They come to us.
That's it, yeah.
So while you're thinking about being in the banking industry, you really need to think about being in the insurance industry because we're the money industry, for real.
For real, without a doubt.
So, that's my soapbox. I just think it's between those three things. If we could get those three things right and fix those and start to look to how to rectify those, you'll see an influx of Blacks coming into our industry.
That was a strong point that you made, even with, the comparison of, the actual population of the country and the comparison of the statistics of the industry and the fact that, there is representation there. Because I know that I've been one that said, hey, we're underrepresented. But I mean, putting that in perspective, there is the representation, but also to your point, 100% correct. as far as the higher levels of decision making and responsibility, because I think that's like 3%.
Right.
In the managers, executives, or agency principals, individuals like yourself, is even a more condensed percentage. So it's moving people into those roles, or at least the aspiration, to move into those roles, because you're right. I mean, the intelligence is there. Alonzo Herndon did it. John Merritt, did it. William Washington Brown in Richmond did it. So it's been done before. It's just a matter of doing it now.
Exactly.
Doing it now in this generation. So let's go back to your story and how how you're doing it now. You're doing it now.
I'm trying.
Let's go back though. Let's go back to 9-year-old Ngozi. You told me a little bit about your family before. I want to share some of that, on this platform. What were you dreaming? What were you dreaming of being when you grew up? What were you thinking about?
Look, I don't even really know. People ask me that because my dad's a Nigerian immigrant, right? So this conversation about what do you want to be when you grow up, like he circumvented that real early, right? So I don't even remember a vision of, I want to be a ballerina I don't remember that. I remember, and it very clearly, it was, either my sophomore or junior year in in high school. My dad sat me down. He was like, look, you're good in math, right? The number one profession in the U.S. is to be an actuarial science. I didn't even know how to spell that, but in my house, like Dad says, you said okay, right? And and I was like, okay, Dad, if that's what we doing, that's what we doing, right? Like, let's get it done. And so I knew from that sophomore year what I was going to be, right? It was just a matter of, executing on that. I mean, to the extent that, we looked at, the top actuarial colleges, right? One of them back in, it was FAMU, right? Happened to be FAMU, my HBCU, my alma mater. And we were like, check, done. Like it checked all the boxes, actuarial science or the HBCU. It was in our hometown.
Right.
We already knew I was going to college.
Right.
Like there wasn't a filling out of 15 applications or nothing. We already knew. And my dad was a professor there. I got a scholarship, right? Like we knew. Yeah. And I get like, a lot of families don't have the opportunity or privy to the situation like I had. And I don't take that for granted, right? I had, when we talk about allies, I kind of feel like my dad was my first ally. He looked at me as a Black woman and says, here, let me prop you up. Let me give you the resources and the knowledge you need to create a career that's sustainable, right? In an industry that's not going away, that will always be here, right? And that you can, even if you don't like being an actuary, you can do something else, right? And you still stay in the industry. And he did that for myself and my two sisters. So I have a sister who's in healthcare and a sister who's an engineer. And all three of us, 20 years later, are still in the same industries that he identified and picked out for us. So that says something about his foresight into kind of where he knew our skill sets were and where we ended up being. But I will tell you, like I took one step into insurance and never looked back, right? Because it is all being, right? Like it is everything you want it to be. The question is, what do you want it to be?
What do you want
right for you? Right. And so we talked about representation and you talked about, agency ownership. If you want to be an entrepreneur, we got that. Right. If you want to influence generational wealth and help the community, we got that. Yeah. Right. If you want to be a mogul, right.
I sure got that.
Right.
Yeah.
Because Warren Buffett has shown us you can own 18 million different insurance companies, right? And come out on top, right? Like there's so much. And even if you just want to be, right, stay in your lane, be an HR professional, be an accountant, like you can still do that, right? So whatever you want, we got. And so I've never had to look anyplace else. So it disappoints me when I talk to colleagues. I'm like, they're asking me how I got into the business. I'm getting all excited, right, to tell my story. And then when I ask them, they're like, yeah, I just kind of fell into it,
It's the common story though.
Well, it is a common story. And to me, the disappointing fact is like, if you were a college student listening to that,
Yeah.
would that excite you about coming into our industry?
No.
No, come
No.
on. And then you wonder why we
It's a
got a big
fallback plan.
gap.
It comes off like the fallback.
It does. It does. And so, no wonder we have a talent gap.
Right.
No wonder we can't recruit, right? Because we coming out there like, well, if you want to come into the insurance industry, I be telling the kids, yo, look, I bought my house off this insurance money. I got my car. You know what I mean? Like, I'm paying for 2 college tuitions off this insurance. And like, I tell other people's stories. Like, I have this one gentleman here in Hartford, Connecticut, was an agent by 18, was slinging insurance policies while in college. Came out of college, got his first, not even 30 yet.
Yeah. Oh, he's not 18. It's by the time he's 30. Hey.
Right.
I mean, if he wanted to.
If he wanted to.
If he wanted to, he might be like, I'm just gonna sit out for a little while.
Yeah, I'm just gonna chill in Aruba somewhere for a
Right.
year and I'll be good. I'll catch back up when I'm 30.
Right. No, it's powerful to mention that because once again, in this platform, people listening, they might be on the fence. Maybe someone spoke with them about it because a lot of times, you don't get exposed to it until later on. I know that if I found out about this industry when I was 18, 19 years old, it could have saved, like I had some great times in my 20s. I had great times, some amazing times.
Knock that out, yeah.
But it definitely could have changed the trajectory of some of the things that I wanted to accomplish, earlier in my life that maybe I've done now, some things that I still want to do, I might have done them already. But one thing I'm fortunate about, and you mentioned, your children being in college, they get to see you doing it.
Exactly. Well, what's interesting though, I have to tell this story because I have to be accountable for what I haven't done as well. And I will tell you, in recent years, I have been very, I don't know, the industry checked me. COVID checked me. I'll put it that way. COVID checked me because, you take for granted, to your point, like what your kids see you do and what they know about what you're doing, right? I just assume I'm a big mouth Black lady. Like my kids know what I do, right? Like they hear me on the phone, right? They know I'm willing and dealing, like, slinging all this insurance, right? But all 4 of my kids, one coming home from college, during COVID, right? Everybody was locked on lockdown. So I'm sitting at the kitchen table and I'm slinging, I'm doing my thing. And, one of them is asking me like, what are you doing? I'm like, what do you mean what I'm doing? You know what I'm doing? They're like, yeah, no, we just know you in insurance. Like, we don't really know. And that hit me like, it hit me hard because I took for granted that I hadn't sat them down and showed them, right, really what I just thought that they just picked up, I don't know, through osmosis, I don't know, right, what I did. And so I was convicted at that point to make them a more integral and an active part of my business, right? Because to me, I can't go out there and say, Chubb, Travelers, New York Life, you got to do more to recruit more Black talent when I didn't even recruit my own kids, right? So to me, it was like a slap in the face. Like, if I'm not doing it, I can't call out these companies, right? So for me, it was, I have my oldest son who's 18 getting his license this year, right? He's at LSU, but he's going to be doing the same thing I told you that other guy was doing, right? He's going to be in the library. That's going to be his office. His cafeteria is going to be his where he does his selling, right? Yeah. But how else, was I going to hold myself accountable if I wasn't bringing my own kids? I got a daughter who's great on social media. Look, she don't have to be in it, but she can help support it, right?
That's right.
So
that's right. There's always that space. So, so you're in the process even now, making sure that your children know the pathway, right? Let's talk about your path because the consulting firm is, the last couple of years you made that shift. Let's talk about where you started initially. So did you start as an actuary? You started as an underwriter first, or where'd you start from? Take me through
I started off thinking I was going to be an actuary. Okay. So Dad told me, you're going to be an actuary. Like, cool, Dad, I'm going to FAMU. You know, I started college at 16. So I want to put that out there because I think, you know, although to some degree, you know, there's mature 16s. I don't know if I could qualify myself.
Out of college at 16. She's only right.
Right. Well, but I want to mention that because the reason did my first internship at 17. So if you think about that, you know, I'm still giggly talking, you know, oh, I'm gonna go to get my nails done. I got money now. I'm an intern, right? So I interned with Minnesota Mutual, which is a pension firm in St. Paul, Minnesota. I thought I was doing it up, right? I'm talking, smiling at all the people. Hey, I'm here. They pulled me to the side. They were like, look, so as an actuary, you're doing too much talking. You're doing too much right? Yeah. And at that point, you know, here I am 17, I'm like, yo, maybe being an actuary is not what I need to be. Like I had the acumen for it, but my personality was such that, you know, look, I didn't want to be behind the desk all day, right? And you know, the role and the function of an actuary has changed in the last 25 years drastically, but that wasn't what I wanted, right? At that point, in my life. So I was like, I knew I wanted to stay in the insurance industry, but I was like, I ain't gonna be no actuary. And I ain't taking these exams because it's 100 hours per exam. I probably like 120 now. Wow. And I went to FAMU, the best HBCU there. I was all about that life, that life. So long story short, I ended up going into underwriting. And I started my career off with the St. Paul Insurance Company, best underwriting training program. I did 20 years of medical malpractice. I was an underwriter, a large brokerage broker. So I did a lot of marketing around large healthcare systems and things like that. So I did that. I traveled, you know, I relocated, you know, 4 or 5 times across the US and really created a proficiency around being, you know, in that space. And I was trying to matriculate. So, you know, I had the technical skills, at least what I thought were sound technical skills. And I'll explain that in a minute. And then I wanted to start to, you know, matriculate into leadership, right? So starting to manage people. And so I got this opportunity to go to an organization, to go to CNA, to be a regional manager in the medical malpractice space. But I will tell you, that is when I think my confidence got shook the most. And as a Black woman in an organization where you're told by people around you, you're stretch higher, like, you know, I didn't really want you here, but, you know, for the, you know, almost like positive discrimination, like on 10, right? Like, you're just here because of your skin. You're just here because we needed some diversity kind of thing. And at the time, you know, I had dealt with it, but it was not that blatant, right? And I just didn't know what to do. I was like, oh my God, like here I am, you know, trying to survive in this. And you start to really question, again, your skill sets, right? Your proficiency. So that's where I said before, I thought I had, right? I was confident coming in, but by the time CNA finished with me, I was questioning everything about the original, you know, the first 20 years of my development in this industry. And so, you know, unfortunately, it did not work out at CNA. I think I made some great impact around leading people and gaining trust around, you know, my colleagues. But I quickly found out that that was just not the route for me, nor was it the organization for me. And I questioned my purpose. So here I am, a Black woman who, you know, 20 years of industry experience. I knew I didn't want to go anywhere else, but what do I do now? Right? What do I do now? And so my dad, being Nigerian and being very much a proponent of the give back, right? So you stretch your arm back and you bring others forward, you bring the community forward. I knew I hadn't done that because I was so focused on my career, what I thought was the way I was supposed to matriculate in the industry. And really challenged my purpose and determined that I wanted to bring more people into the industry because I knew it was a good industry by large, right? And then there's some sketchy people, but still good industry. But secondly, I needed to educate people, right? Like if I, you know, what I knew I did best as a broker and an underwriter is educate my clients first, right? And granted, that was the healthcare space, but I wanted to educate like my people, right? Like if I couldn't help anybody else, I needed to help my people. And I felt being an agent was the only way I could do that. At the time, I felt that was the only way I could touch people in both capacities, by being an independent agent. So I got my little box, packed it up from CNA, and I was like, deuces. Wow. But I didn't know what I was doing, right?
Okay.
I didn't know what I was doing.
Oh, this is good. This is good because it's you say, hey, I'm going to step in this direction, but shoot, sometimes you get knocked in the face. You got to bob, weave, and okay. Look. Okay, all right. So go ahead.
I was ducking, jumping over. I was doing it all because I was like, in my mind, I was like, I dealt with agents, right, for 20 years. I was a broker, not really an agent, but a broker, right, for part of that. So I got this. When I got asked questions like, where's your agency management system? Huh? What? I got this book right here. Right? Like, what's your lead generation strategy? I don't know. I'm just calling people. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so it really, I when you talk about scratch agency, that literally, I started from nothing. I didn't know what I was doing, but glory be to God, right? Like, he kept putting people in my life that showed me and gave me a chance, right? Even if they were for short stints, I was able to get data and wisdom from them to better build my agency. And, a couple of people like Brent Young, who was like, you know what? I see you, sis. I know you don't know what you're doing, so I'm going to pull you over here. I'm going to pull you over here. I'm going to help you out. I'm going to contract with you. I'm going to let you have access to my carriers, right? And this is the beauty. And this is why I love what we're doing even now around, engaging and bringing Black solidarity together, because he said to me, he was like, yo, I could charge you, right? I could take half your commission, right? I could take half of it to cover, the cost around agency management, He's like, but I'm not going to do that, right? Because I see you trying to build. I'm going to take the bare minimum because you need that to scale and grow your business. Yo, who does that, right? Yeah. Who does that, right? And so that's where I think we need to look at it as opportunities to allow others to grow, because if he had not done that for me, I don't think my agency would have survived. Right. And so this is where now I'm at a point, like, I'm not a big agency, now that I got this consultant thing going on, I try to keep my toes in the water, and I got to leave it for that 18-year-old at LSU that's behind me, right? My son. But it sustains me, right? It covers bills, right? It allows me to do those two things, those two purposes I had around engaging and recruiting. So, I'm happy. But I tell you, sometimes we step out on faith, right? Because we know it's the right thing to do, not knowing what to do. That's and that's why if anyone is listening who is kind of in that situation, your network is so key. Build that network yesterday.
Absolutely.
Right? Because those are the people who you can call on to be like, excuse me, excuse me, I done messed up. How do I fix it?
Hey, listen, we're gonna have some calls after this. Let me ask you a question. So you said, hey, I left, you left CNA, you jumped straight in. Start my agency, boom, I'm jumping right in. Would you recommend that for somebody else?
No, not at all. Not at all. Okay. I would recommend creating, at least having, and I don't want to formally call it a business plan, but I know people are referencing that, but at least understand kind of what you need and the strategy in which you're going to obtain it, right? Like, I had no strategy, right? I just thought, because I had 20 years of experience and because I knew medical malpractice, those people that knew me in that space, of course they would do business with me. Right.
Not so much.
But not at all. Not at all. Right. So you have to recognize, where your strong suits are, have a plan for where you think you can penetrate. Because I thought I could get into the medical malpractice space, but there was no one like me in the medical malpractice space that looked like me. So when I transitioned from underwriter to agent, they were like, oh, wait a minute. You want us to do business with you now? But I'm the one who underwrote your account for 5 years.
Right.
And you saw me at every renewal. Like, what? And now you don't want to do business with me? So that hurt my little heart. And so, not that this is the case across the board. Let me just say that. But I've found support from a business perspective in my community,
Yes.
right? And I'm not trying to say everyone has to stick to their community, but just for me, when I started to build my agency, I went to my people, and they're the ones that embraced me and have given me the business, right, so that I can grow my agency to what it is now. So my focus is now going from medical malpractice, big health systems, to minority-owned businesses. That's what I focus on.
Mm, mm. So you said have a plan, have a plan in place if you are going to get started. Would you say maybe you should go to another firm and spend some time as a producer and then step out? Or is it okay to kind of do your own thing as long as you have put some thought into how you're going to approach, the marketplace?
Yeah, I think the latter, because I do think, like, I mentioned Brent Young. I'm not an employee of Brent's. We have a contractual relationship. So I think there's opportunities to structure your relationships in such a way that you don't necessarily have to be employed, right? But then you can still benefit from that partnership to get what you need to start your own agency. Again, it goes back to that plan. Maybe you feel more comfortable in the employment model because it guarantees you a salary, right, to some degree, whether you're doing a draw situation or not. But again, you got to think about just what works for you, right? And for me, I again, even though I stumbled and fell a couple of times at the beginning, I knew I didn't want to go into an employment model. I wanted to be able to kind of structure this independently. And so that's why I went more contractual and creating a relationship that allowed me still that access, but I could still be independent to some degree. But I also, there's captive opportunities, right? I just think you got to think through that. If captive sounds more appealing because, again, you're being given the capital, right? Because that's a thing. You need that money, not only, to cover expenses related to the business, but again, to cover your cost of living. You need resources, right? You need lead generation. And if you feel more comfortable that a captive situation is more, again, more comfortable for you, then go ahead. Right. And, maybe, 15 years down the road, you're like, okay, I'm ready to go independent because now I know the business. Now I know how to operate an agency. Now, granted, you can't take that book with you most of the time.
Right. There's always a trade-off.
There's always a trade-off. But as long as you know that going in, and part of your planning, going back to making sure you're having a plan, is like recognizing, okay, I'm gonna have to give that up. How do I plan to start a new book from scratch on my own? Then that's fine, right? Then that's fine. I think to your point, though, you need to have a plan, but you need to have a network. You need both. I don't think you can have one without the other personally.
Absolutely.
I just, whether that's being a part of the National African American Insurance Association, whether that's growing, a network of Black agents or Black underwriters or whatever it might look like in your discipline or in your geographical location. But you need to have people you can call on, regardless of what space or place you're in. I mean, even actuaries, right? That profession is changing so much to where, like I said, they used to be behind the desk. They were like in the dungeon. You never knew who they were. To now they're client facing, right? They're engaging, right? They're doing all sorts of things. So how do you get a better sense of what that is if you don't have a network to inform you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what do you think for, someone who is new or looking to explore? Let's say they're coming from a different industry, right? They're looking to enter this space and they need to build out, that network. They want to get to meet people. You mentioned, Naya as one. It could be somebody who is, they're not African American, but they're still trying to bridge into the space. Like what are some points of guidance that you might say, hey, try this to start building your relationships?
I think trade organizations are key, right? Because I think, again, they allow you to have access to people, not only in your geographical location, but outside of your geographical location. Depending on the trade organization, they can be people within your discipline or outside of your discipline, right? So I think trade organizations is a great way to kind of say, hey, can I just meet with you and talk this through? I'm interested in X, Y, and Z. Regardless of your race, regardless of where your background, meaning to your point, coming from a new industry, I think starting to have those conversations are key. I do think that you have to do your research, right? So, thank God for the internet and thank God for Google and all these other search engine platforms, because there's so much, right? I mean, even listening to this podcast, right? If you just said insurance podcasts in Google, right? Or on YouTube, right? I mean, there's a slew of them. And this being one of the top ones, I think this is where you can find the information you're looking for. I mean, and honest information, not textbook material. Like, this is the real, y'all. This ain't gonna be
100.
like, it ain't pretty, it ain't cute. It is honest though.
But if you stick it through,
yeah.
But if you stick it through, like, that's the key. But this is one of the things that I think about. It's like, and I'm asking to you as a question, how do you feel like this business has changed you or grown you as a person over the years?
Oh, wow. It continues to grow me. So I think there's a lot of different aspects to this industry that have helped develop me to who I am. I mean, first and foremost, obviously, as an industry, we're an evolving industry, right? We respond to how society is changing, right? So, obvious point, technology, right? I mean, over the last 30, 40 years, we have changed drastically because we're responding to new technology that's coming on the scene, right? Now we have, InsurTech, which exists, which, again, it was a thing 50 years ago, but it's evolving to now it's more of a thing, right? It's more of a thing,
right?
Right, the thing, right? So I think, technically speaking, because of that, I've been able to, grow and understand and develop in that fashion on the technical side. But I think, also maturing from a leadership perspective, right? I mean, there's so many opportunities within our industry to have a voice and to have influence. It's just about finding where that is, right? Maybe it is within your organization, right? So if you want to be a leadership there's opportunities. But I also think even outside, and I think that's the beauty of our industry. Like, there's so many opportunities even outside of where you're employed that you can start to shape what you define leadership to look like, and your influence, and shape how your influence impacts people. And granted, I'm sure that exists in a lot of other industries, but I think especially for BIPOC and underrepresented groups, that this is a new shift for our industry, right? Like, before, yes, people got promoted. Yes, there's the people of color in leadership, but again, to our point earlier, not enough. And so now, as these opportunities get created, don't be afraid to step into them, right? Don't be afraid to raise your hand and say, hey, I want to be a part of this. Because I think that's important, that you start to recognize, your maturity in these leadership kind of platforms and roles. But I just think, as a person too, right? If your network is a ride or dies like mine, they'll check you at every turn. They'll check, but that's what they're supposed to do, right? But that's what they're supposed to do. So I would say, again, going back to the whole network conversation, you need, a group of individuals that are, that will give you, input, whether you call them mentors, whether you call them, confidants, whether you call them, I don't care what you call them, people who will just give you the real. And I try to keep those people close, right? Because if I'm turning left and I'm turning right, and that's a wrong turn to make, I need someone not 5 steps behind me, on my back. Saying, hold up, sis. Let's make this U-turn real quick. And so I think, so you have professionally, you have, leadership wise, you have socially, and just personally, great opportunities for development in our industry.
So you can cultivate your leadership skills. You can cultivate your networks just by building and
exactly
with other people, right? And different things, and they're going to challenge you. You're going to be able to challenge them. Going back to something you had mentioned earlier, kind of going into an organization and having to deal with people's ignorance, and their own kind of nuanced personalities, it kind of helps cultivate, thicker skin too,
Exactly. You gotta have a thick skin. You gotta have a thick skin. Because I mean, our industry, especially when we're talking about, again, underrepresented groups, I mean, we're behind the curve, right? We got a lot of things we got to do. And so if you don't recognize that people are going to make mistakes, people, not everybody is at the same place in their journey around diversity. And I know we use that term diversity journey a lot, but I mean, it's real. It is a process. So you have to be able to recognize that, some days are going to be good days, some days are not, right? Some people are going to accept you and some people are not. Sometimes you got to fight and sometimes you can coast, right? But you got to have that thick skin on the onset to be prepared for whatever the road might take.
Absolutely. So with everything you got going on, I mean, you're winning awards, you're playing, network is vast. Like, what is it that keeps you motivated? Like, what's driving you now?
My clique and my family.
Right.
I mean, so, I love getting on the phone, and you and I have done it many times where, that energy around building and around doing and around impacting is like, we'll be on the phone for an hour and only talk about two things. Right? Because the energy is there and the desire to make a difference is there. That keeps me motivated every day. And, the only thing second to that is legacy. Like I want a better place for my kids, and whether it's in the industry that I'm in or outside the industry, I want a better place. And so I got to do my part to help build it. Right. And so if I'm going to make that happen, especially in my industry, well, I got some blocks I need to, stack on top of some cement. I got to make it work. And so that keeps me motivated as well.
Absolutely. Well, you definitely got one here. You already know. You already know.
Well, like someone was teasing me the other day. They're like, why do you call him your rock star? I was like, mind your business, yo. Right. Like he's my rock star, right? That's what he needs to know, right?
Yes. Look, so I appreciate that. You know what? That's what drives me. I remember one time we were talking, and I can't remember what we were talking about at the time, but I called you, and I just jumped right into whatever the subject was. And I was like, hold on a second, my bad. You're like, no, let's get to it.
Don't stop now. Yeah, we in it.
But you're right. It's like the excitement and the energy is infectious, and it does, just kind of keep things moving forward. It keeps the momentum going. So for somebody who is listening to this conversation, this is kind of our closing question for you. They're listening to this conversation and maybe they're thinking about, getting into the industry. Maybe they're facing some of the same challenges, that you're faced. It's another, it's a Black woman. Maybe she's at a company right now.
Yeah,
right. And she's in a role and she's thinking about maybe making the transition, going out on her own, or maybe in a different industry, and saying, hey, what might this insurance industry, be all about? What would Ngozi and Nnaji have to say to her?
Come on, sis. Like what you got to lose, right? Like, I'm a firm believer that, again, going back to that whole comment of stepping out on faith and just trying, right? I mean, this industry is the best industry there is, right? And I can show you better, I can tell you, right? So you gotta step out and believe. And I just, I want people to recognize that it is the foundation for so many different things currently in our society. There's not another industry that exists like ours that touches every other industry. You can't get a car without insurance. You can't get a home without insurance. Businesses can't be businesses without insurance. So there's not another industry like ours. So if you're thinking about it, stop thinking, do
it.
Be a part of this industry. Look, it's the takeover, right?
It is. You know what that snap? You know what my snap is for.
I know that's right.
That's inside. One guy make that. Yeah. But how do folks get in contact, with you, or how do they find out more about Aqua Insurance Consulting and what you're doing? If there's a carrier company listening to this and they want to reach out and find out how to get more, engagement, the quote unquote diversity, equity, inclusion, campaign strategies in place for them, how do they get in contact with you?
So we have a website, aquainsuranceconsulting.com. I got to get a website for the brokerage. Like historically, it's all been referrals, but y'all crazy out there. I need to. So look for that to come. ACO Brokerage Services website. We're on all the major social media platforms: LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. So ACO Brokerage, ACO Insurance Consulting, all there. And I do a little, personal stuff on Facebook and on LinkedIn. Ngozi Nnaji, Ngozi, last name Nnaji. But we out there. We out there.
She ain't hard to find, y'all. She ain't hard to find. Look, you just hit her with an A. Google.
Yeah, right. Right? Come on, bro. Right? We try to make it easy for y'all. So let me just say, Rod, thank you so much. I appreciate
you so much for coming on. Listen, this has been a powerful conversation. Lots of nuggets, lots of great information, education, once again, inspiration, which is something that you always do. If you see a Black Friday that's happening close to you,
boom, there it is.
You need to go. You need to be there. If you hear about, if you hear about a Black Men in Insurance call, that's happening, whether it be on Clubhouse or a LinkedIn event, you need to be there. If you hear about Black Women in Insurance call, you need to be there. I guarantee you will not leave any of those forums thinking the same way you did when you entered those forums. And if you were thinking similar, it's going to be enhanced.
Yes.
You're gonna be on fire. And in order to stay warm, you got to stay close to the fire. So thank you all for listening. I appreciate you. And maybe in this conversation, you heard yourself, you maybe had that voice in your head or a little thought that made you think, maybe you should get a license. Until next time, talk soon. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rod. Have a good one.